Hi everybody, this is Kim C, and you're listening to the Year of Underrated Stephen King. I'm a university fiction teacher, and this is my one-woman Stephen King podcast where the focus and priority is the writing of Stephen King. I dig in, spin the text, shake out all the loose coins, and see what King left us with his fiction craft mastery. Hello boys and girls, and welcome to a very sharp, unexpected detour from the Bill Hodges trilogy coverage. I couldn't hold in my excitement and joy over today's novel, so it got pushed to the front of the line. Today we're exploring 2018's The Outsider, and I am pumped. Dang, this novel is something, my good buddies. Wow. We've got some Steve King full dark up in this house, and it's impressive. It is so impressive. I turned the wheel of this car sharply to avoid end of watch for a little while longer because this one just commands my attention. So haphazardly speaking, we're skipping over end of watch for just a temporary amount of time, and then I will circle back and complete my coverage on the Bill Hodges trilogy, I promise. But today, in this episode's exploration, we've got some gritty Shakespearean downfalls, tragic characters, rash actions, and haunting consequences, police intel, investigation, and at its heart, a sinister, supernatural entity feeding off not fear, but pain. Human grief, the price and cost of love. Oh, my friends, this one is so gritty. Ladies and gentlemen, it is so gritty. We are in the grout of the floor. We are in it, my dudes. No joke. This marks a second time read for me, and it was a most enjoyable experience. I really got a lot out of this second read through, so I feel very rich and satisfied from digesting this one. Of course, I read The Outsider for the first time, if memory serves me, pretty soon after it came out. And I remember really enjoying the story, and with this second read-through, all initial positive feelings for this novel have definitely enhanced, and that's always so amazing to behold when it's even better the second time around. I love that. Don't you guys love that? In this novel, King definitely takes us into the heart of what he's been working towards / flexing in terms of crime fiction. I think with Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, and End of Watch, it was all sort of like lifting a little bit of weight. We're gaining a little bit of strength, and he's building his technique and establishing a group of characters in a crime-solving, mystery-revealing capacity. But with The Outsider, ooh, folks, it's the darkest it's ever been in terms of said crime solving because the stakes are very, very high and the window of time is very narrow to get everything figured out. With this second read through, recently finished, I feel with The Outsider, King turns everything up to level 11. Every storytelling element is ramped up to its strongest level. Characters, plot, pacing, tone. Ooh, and on top of all that, we have a very high body count. Everywhere you look, there is death and destruction. And Miss Holly Gibney is now, in this novel, at the center stage to help solve this very unique, complex, complicated case. Before I get into Miss Holly, I did want to celebrate King's use of doppelganger in this story. I actually recently did a mini lecture in one of my classes on this, so I really freaked out when I got to see it live and in person. Doppelganger is of course a German word meaning double goer, and this is used as a frequent device in Gothic literature. What the Germans intended with this word is something evil masquerading with your face. So when you hear that term, it's a little bit more involved than just an evil twin, because when you hear the word doppelganger, you should not associate it with a genetic double, because the way it was originally brought forth was to put a label on something malicious, something dark and horrifying. It looks like you. And this thing with your face has sinister intent, It's going to cause havoc. It's going to confuse your loved ones. It's going to trick them, potentially harm them, and generally create some terrible scenarios. In a typically misty haunted house somewhere, there might be rocks, there might be a dark ocean, the gothic setting. But yes, so doppelganger is a huge literary device that is at the heart of this novel. And I want you to keep that in your mind's eye as we go forward. The other aspect I super duper love about this novel is that King takes this murder mystery and weaves in the supernatural rather gently, very effectively, I would say, by plugging the reader into folklore-derived monsters, other, quote, feeders, end quote, if you will, without giving too much away. And in this novel, we have El Cucuy. That is a monster I'm very familiar with, because in this part of the world, in this part of the country, El Cucuy, as well as the Chupacabra, La Llorona, and other monster legends of that nature, they're very prominent, not only in this region of the world, but my personal family history. My mom is full Hispanic. She is half Mexican, half Spanish. And I was taught from a very young age that El Cucuy lives in the closet in a darkened hallway, and he will grab you and eat you, and you'll never see your parents again. You'll also be dead, but he's totally real, guys. He's out there, as is Chupacabra. If you find yourself walking in open desert with nothing and no one around, well, the Chupacabra is gunning for you. He's out there. 100% real. Facts. But in this novel we're working with, King specifically highlights El Cuco, which still has roots in Latin culture, and it was a real treat to have this legend that's very familiar get the King treatment as it goes from legend and folktale to something very, very real to the logical characters in this novel whose careers are rooted in evidence-based information and cold empirical facts. And then, to throw another log on the pile of everything I enjoyed, we also have certain areas of this novel that's very reminiscent of one of my favorite plays, Arthur Miller's The Crucible. The Crucible is based on the Salem witch trials of the 1790s maybe 1800s. My timeline for that is terrible. Forgive me, history buffs. I don't remember. I feel like the Malleus Maleficarum was 1700s late, so please forgive me. Anyway, The Crucible is based on the Salem witch trials, and Miller wrote it to covertly / not so covertly talk about McCarthyism and communism and the Red Scare in Hollywood and all areas of global government in the 1950s. We got a lot of that in this novel, where people are accused of something that completely destroys their reputation, their families' lives, and sadly there's a lot of evidence to incriminate them, but yeah, witch hunt all around. It's a very big theme in this book. King does some really cool things with it. On this second read through, the other surprising reminder I had from this stellar text, The Outsider, is that it had me thinking very strongly about a few other King titles that really handle mystery in a way where the payout might not be as grand as the pay-in, but they're still excellent and memorable reading experiences. So the first title that I was really thinking about strongly was, of course, 2002's From a Buick 8. In that novel, we have a large group of cops, a lot of weird, puzzling, alien-esque evidence that frequently appears from a car randomly left at a rest stop in rural Pennsylvania. And the reader, at the end, has way more questions unanswered than answered, but that's, in my opinion, the magic of it. If you enjoyed The Outsider and haven't yet read From a Buick 8, let's do that, because it channels some really powerful currents that I found inside The Outsider. And so for me, it was really great to have these two stories somewhat side by side in my mind, and it was nice to observe that what I found in 2002's title is fully realized in 2018's title. The Colorado Kid is another super short 2005 hard case crime title that is totally fascinating. A lot of people slough it off, They don't care about it. They don't pay it any mind. Au contraire, mon frère. A ton of mystery and questions. It's well worth an additional read if you like the concepts explored within The Outsider, as well as From a Buick 8. It seems as though King drives around these very large investigative, quote, what's the truth concepts in several works. But this one has such strong iron beams behind it, folks, that I think The Outsider might be the strongest in terms of these investigative narrative concepts that we have in the King catalog. The jury's still out. I'm really leaning in that direction. I welcome, of course, other evidence to counteract that, but just throwing my cards out there. We will dig into that more as we go forward. Okay, this title has, in the American hardcover I possess, 560 pages, and it's divided into 10 parts over a 2-weekish, we'll say 3 weeks max in July. And we have third-person limited with various point of views throughout this story. Part 1, The Arrest, July 14th. Part 2, Sorry, July 14th to July 15th. Part 3, The Arraignment, July 16th. Part 4, Footsteps and Cantaloupe, July 18th to July 20th. Number 5, Yellow, July 21st to July 22nd. Number 6, Holly, July 22nd to July 24th. Part 7, Visits, July 25th. Part 8, Macy's Tells Gimbals, July 25th. Part 9, Bienvenidos a Texas, which means Welcome to Texas, July 26th. Part 10, The Marysville Hole, July 27th. Then we have our epilogue, which is technically part 11, but it is not labeled as such. Epilogue, Flint City, After. Per my last Bill Hodges investigation, which according to this podcast is Finders Keepers, we have a very similar page pattern where approximately 250 pages into the novel, that's when Holly Gibney appears. We do have that same thing in this novel. Around page 283 is when we get our first mention of Holly, and boy, are we glad to see her. Before we launch into our summary, in this episode, I'm going to cover characters first because dang, we got a lot of people to cover and they're all super strong and really essential to the power found within this text. We will then transition into strengths, criticism, and questions, and then we're going to talk about the 2020 HBO limited series starring Ben Mendelsohn, Mare Winningham, and Cynthia Erivo as Holly Gibney. Please make sure you've read this novel and watched the series because I don't want to ruin any part of the book or any part of the show for you because, oh my gosh, guys, the show is so dang good. Wow. It is such an incredible adaptation, and this was my second time through it, and hold the phone. I've got some thoughts. We're definitely going to spend some time talking about the series, and I might need to have it top of mind when I am asked what my favorite Stephen King television adaptation is. It is still forever going to be Storm of the Century, but I think this one might be a close second. More on that later. Now that we have our schedule at hand, let's launch into a summary for 2018's The Outsider. Detective Ralph Anderson has a dead 11-year-old boy on his hands and multiple eyewitness accounts as well as DNA evidence that point to Flint City, Oklahoma's #1 citizen, middle school English teacher and Little League baseball coach, Terry Maitland. Terry Maitland has a rock-solid alibi and video evidence that proves he wasn't at the scene of the crime, but in a different city entirely. A past police connection to Bill Hodges creates a phone call to Ohio and gets Holly Gibney on the line to request her unique perspective. Holly connects the pieces from a past Ohio case and gets on a plane to Flint City to explore a powerful and frightening idea that the killer of Frankie Petersen is someone and something else entirely, an outsider. Alright, King fans, I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and get into the mud with this one. Let's start the show. Greetings, armchair detectives. This is the character section for 2018's The Outsider. Ooh, buddies, I'm so excited to dig into these names with you. We've got some absolute treasures up in here. But before we get started, just a heads up, I don't have every single character from the novel in these sections, just in case one might be a little nervous on who I'm going to talk about. In each episode, I tend to pick the characters who really stand out, who are vitally important to the text, or someone who just makes a really good impression on me and I enjoy this character. If they're not hitting any of those categories, typically they will not be mentioned. Just a heads up. So now, let us begin with our two households. In Fair Verona, where we lay our scene, not quite, we're actually in Flint City, Oklahoma. And the two families I want to discuss with you first are the Maitlands and the Petersens. The Maitlands are comprised of husband Terry, wife Marcy, oldest daughter Sarah, I think she's about 8, and youngest daughter Grace, who is approximately 6, I believe. Next we have the Petersens. We have father Fred, mother Arlene, teenage to young adult son Ollie, and 11-year-old Frankie Petersen. In both of these households, in both of these families, we have two tremendously tragic characters. Our first tragic character is, of course, 11-year-old Frankie Petersen, who is our victim. This poor sweet boy is brutally murdered, and it is graphic, friends. If you are someone who struggles with strong violence against children, this is a little hard to stomach. It's really bad. The other tragic character is, of course, Terry Maitland. And friends, with this second read-through, I didn't remember the power of Terry Maitland's tragedy. And I believe, sadly, he's not in the book as long as I would like, but I believe he has that same kind of tragic power that Johnny Smith has from The Dead Zone, as well as Scott Landon has from Lacey's story, where the pain I feel in my heart for this character and the unjust suffering they have endured, it kind of breaks me. And so Terry Maitland's suffering really hit on a new level this second read through. But yes, the Maitlands and the Petersens. The Maitlands, of course, are destroyed with this heinous accusation and kind of hypothetically die. In a way, Marcy and her daughters are going to have a really hard time ever being accepted and normalized members of their community because their reputation has been destroyed from this allegation. And then the Petersens, of course, there's so much tragedy that befalls every single one of them because of the ripple effect of what happened to Frankie. What happens to Frankie is like a domino effect, and every single member of his family, without revealing too much, has such tragic results. It is rough, guys. It is dark Shakespearean doom, let me tell you. The next family I will mention is the Andersons. We have lead detective Ralph Anderson, who seems to be slightly younger than Bill. Bill was in his early 60s when we met him. I think this guy might be mid to late 40s. There's also his wife Jeannie and their preteen son Derek, who is not present in the text. He is only referred to as being away at summer camp because, as you know, it is the middle of July. Summer is bopping. Baseball is being played, popsicles are being eaten. It is summertime. School is out, so that's where Derek is. The other character who I really, really like, he makes a very crucial / critical appearance, and I just enjoyed this guy, is 12-year-old Merlin, aka Merl Cassidy. And this little car thief, literally a car thief, he's kind of a scene stealer. In the heat of the police investigation, they start tracking down the cars of how said car ended up in said parking lot XYZ, and Merlin was boosting them because he has a very abusive father and he was just running away. I believe he is from somewhere in upstate New York, and this little 12-year-old, man, this little wild child, fearless, brazen, he just kept stealing cars and I'm assuming sleeping in them, and who knows what he did for food. Maybe he just had his Wonder Bread and PB&J in a knapsack, unknown, but I really enjoyed this character and I was so fascinated. I mean, at 12, granted, I was very precocious and very independent, but drive a car? Please, no way. So I liked that. I liked Merl a lot. The next character, who is huge, this is a big guy, not necessarily concerning size, I'm just talking about importance, and that is Howie Gold, who is the lawyer for the Maitlands, specifically Terry Maitland. Howie is sharp, and he is a friend of the Maitlands, so right off the bat there's a deep connection there, and he is a bulldog in the suavest way possible. So maybe not necessarily a bulldog, maybe like a very intimidating Doberman, like with the sharp ears and the searing eyes. I would definitely align that with Howie Gold. He is tough, he is fierce, and he is not having any of these allegations against Terry. It is a heinous crime, but he is not bending in the slightest, especially when there is so much solid evidence for the defense. So Howie Gold is a prominent and important character to this text. He's a tremendous advocate for the Maitlands, and he definitely spars with Ralph Anderson quite a bit, and I like it. Howie Gold is very cool. This next character is very interesting. No one's necessarily a hero or a villain. That's how complex this story is. We've got your average everyday citizens, a small town community. You have people that are on the side of Johnny Law and everybody else. So I can't exactly use my traditional bracket system of heroes, villains, and honorable mentions. It's very interesting that I can't necessarily apply that anywhere. Of course, we do have some heroes, more on that in a little bit, but you guys know what I mean. This next character, I guess we could say villain, ? Right? This is Jack Hoskins. So Jack is also a detective. He is higher up in the police force than Ralph Anderson. He's kind of gross in terms of this is a man of very loose morals. Granted, we don't really get a lot of backstory as to why he's like that, but he's kind of a bitter, divorced man, no kids to speak of. He spends time at strip clubs, he's a substance abuser. He seems just like a very selfish, narcissistic individual. Not my favorite person to read about, but I think the phrase that can best be applied to Jack Hoskins is better the right hand of the devil than in his path. Because that's what happens with Mr. Hoskins. He becomes the right hand of this outsider. But he's forced to do it. He's not willingly allowed to make a choice. The outsider chooses Jack and infects him. I don't want to reveal too much about the plot, but let's just say it gets real bad for Jack Hoskins' body. He is in a tremendous amount of pain and torment. It's body torture for sure. And he is forced by the outsider to do his bidding. And Jack does, because he's in it for number one. He's in it for himself. He doesn't care about anybody else. All he wants to do is get better and forget this whole thing ever happened and drown away the memory in as many six-packs as it takes, or something harder. That's Jack. I wouldn't call him a corrupt cop. I would just call him a cop who's completely burnt out and doesn't really care. He'll go through the motions and he'll do the bureaucratic thing, but at its root, he's rotted wood. He is a gilded frame with rotted wood underneath. So complex. I like it though. I really kind of like Jack Hoskins. Every time he was on the page, I read a little closer. And I also believe Jack, every scenario where he appears, it is usually connected to the outsider. And I believe that's where we have the most horror elements found in this text. Because we do have some, and they be creepy. and it's always associated with Jack. So Jack really does kind of get a situational comeuppance from his association with the outsider. This guy does not want to be on the right hand of this devil, this menace, this monster, but he is forced to. So yes, lots of spooky novel elements consistently associated with Jack Hoskins. My last two characters, who I absolutely adore, are mother and son. We have Claude Bolton, who, this guy, I just like him, guys. And his mother, Lovey Bolton, who... Okay, well, let me talk about Claude first. I'm getting ahead of myself. So Claude works at Gentlemen Please, which is the local strip club. I'm trying to think of a less... Well, strip club isn't crass. I'm trying to think of a better way, a local dancing bar. That doesn't work. Okay, it's a strip joint. You guys know what I mean. Okay. So, Gentlemen Please is the strip club. Claude Bolton works there. And this guy, he has had a rough past. He's been in prison. He's been suffering from addiction. But he really cleaned up his act. He got his life on track. He did Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. He did all the things. He's doing well. He's got a steady job. He's staying out of trouble. He's kind of learning from his mistakes, and he is better, and that's always nice. I do enjoy a character who's trying very hard and succeeding at these attempts at sobriety, staying out of crime, staying on the straight and narrow. He is enjoyable and thankfully avoids a lot of... It could have been real bad for Claude, but I think he definitely dodges a few bullets in this book. Not literal bullets. We'll talk more about that later for the show, but not literal bullets in the novel. But he's kind of sweet. Like, this is somebody I definitely wouldn't trust with my car keys, but I would maybe give him the benefit of the doubt. I would maybe give him a chance, and yeah, especially when you observe how well he's doing. And this is amplified when you see him interact with his mother, Lovey Bolton. What a great name. So Lovey Bolton is in her 90s. She is suffering from COPD, so her lung capacity isn't super strong. But, this lady, I know I've said this in other episodes, but I adore Stephen King's Senior Citizens. I just think he gives those people the most magical one-liners. He gives them such flavor and personality, and he does that with Lovey. So Lovey Bolton is kind of our history teller. When we get to the point in the novel where there is a solid plan and path, and Claude and his mother are kind of involved, there's a little bit of a dine and converse scene that is so good. And Lovey is the star, and she kind of reveals the history of the Bolton family. Her husband, her brother-in-law, her nephews. There's a lot of tragedy associated with the Marysville Hole. But she talks about her youth in the town and roaming around and being in Texas. And there's a lot of years that she covers. And it's a really crafty info dump. It is an info dump, but it's well done because she is such a dynamic character. She is funny and feisty and wants to connect with her audience, which is Holly Gibney, Ralph Anderson, I think Alec Pelly's there. There's Yoon, there's Howie Gold. It's the whole gang. Everybody's there. And Claude. And so she just weaves this wonderful tale of her personal past. It's rich. It's layered. I was compelled. Anytime Lovey was telling me the story of her family, of how much she loves Claude, her late husband, it was great. I just think she is a diamond in this text and comes in at the last minute, and she provides so much critical information that transforms the case. Because her knowledge about the Marysville Hole, oh wow, guys, that is the direction they head in. And without Lovey, I don't know if they would have came to that conclusion. Like, Holly is incredibly smart, but she's still just a person who is from another town. So I think Lovey was completely integral. I just love senior citizen characters under the Stephen King pen because she's beautiful. She's just so full of flavor. Love, love, love me some Lovey Bolton. And of course, our last character is Miss Holly Gibney. I feel in my Finders Keepers episode, I didn't really give her enough runway to talk about how she developed in that iteration. I feel slightly bad about that, but I think it's okay because Finders Keepers, again, she's in the shadows still. It's the second installment in the Bill Hodges trilogy. She's doing better. She's really smart. She's interacting with Jerome and Barbara and getting Finders Keepers off the ground, which does small-time bail bonds, repo things. They're little in the PI business. But the majority of Finders Keepers, we have Bill Hodges haunting and lurking in Brady Hartsfield's hospital room. And that's sort of the more looming side plot. I want to say Holly is still in the background. She's a little bit more in the foreground at End of Watch, more on that later. Guys, End of Watch is just so skippable, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about why it's skippable, but that's why we're here talking about The Outsider. But Holly in The Outsider, everybody, bravo! Round of applause for this queen right here. I was so excited when she comes onto the stage. She is taking care of herself. She has quit smoking. She hasn't had any cigarettes in like a year. She is still grieving over Bill, as it's been approximately 2 years since he passed from pancreatic cancer. She's just staying busy, but she's this lady. She takes courses on forensic pathology. She's continuing to keep herself busy, plugged in, knowledgeable. She still owns all of her quirks and neurospicy tendencies, but this is such a cool installment for Holly because she's out of her safe environment. There is no Jerome, there is no Barbara, there's no Odell the Golden Retriever, there's no Finders Keepers. It's just her by herself in her brain trying to hash this case out using her own observation of the facts, the clues, and following through with that. She has to be in front of strangers. She has to face their backlash of disbelief, and she actually has to quite literally beg people to believe and say, the collective survival of this group is in jeopardy if you're not on board with me. So Holly goes full brazen. She is bold in a way that we've never seen her before, and I love that. She is determined to look after everyone as a collective while also embracing everything that Bill has taught her, staying true to herself. She's fearless, and she surrenders a lot of her own personal creature comforts, which was really surprising because with someone who is as individual as Holly, things need to be a certain way, they need to go down a certain way for her to be comfortable, for her mind to be at ease. She really sacrifices that when she goes to Flint City. She's staying with the Andersons. She kind of didn't want to, but she is. She's not sleeping as much as she would like, so she's really put in this pressure. Because part 6, approximately part 5, part 6, Holly, July 22nd to the 24th, she starts working on the Holmes case in Dayton, Ohio. Holmes is someone who the Outsider also targeted, and he was the orderly at the memory care facility where Terry Maitland's father resided. You'll find out in the text how that all correlates, but Mr. Holmes was convicted of murdering 2 young girls, the Hudson sisters. Of course, we find out all of that did not go down the way the law said it did. So Holly is doing a little bit of pre-work in Ohio before she goes to Flint City, so she just immerses herself in this case. So we really see her dedication, her devotion, the way her mind is working, the way she's observing the data, plugging things in, and also leaning towards the impossible and the improbable more than everybody else. And I think that's the best part. That's kind of why she's such a hero in this novel. She is the one who tells everybody vehemently over and over again, you're going to have to suspend your disbelief hard. You're going to have to really let go of reality for a little bit and get on board with me that this thing is not human. This thing is the boogeyman, in a matter of speaking. This is the monster that isn't supposed to exist, but it does exist, and here's why. That is a really daunting task. You already have your own tall order of just self-care, because when you are neurospicy and have had such a sheltered, anxiety-ridden, institutionalized existence as she has, yeah, it's hard. It's just harder work for one to take care of themselves. But we can see she's doing a really beautiful job with that, staying true to herself. I'm so impressed with what she does and what she gives in this novel. She takes center stage, she owns it, she delivers, and oh wow, there is a lovely connection between her and Ralph Anderson. And it's so sweet because it's similar to her and Bill. It's just, I like that we have more characters in this novel who observe Holly and see the magic through the quirkiness. Some people completely and immediately identify, yeah, she's unique. We hear that said a couple times. She's a very unique individual, which is a very nice, tactful way of saying she might be a little odd, might sort of skew into the negative, but they keep it PC and they don't go there. So we get a lot of, oh yeah, she's unique. But when you see her heart, how she does care for people, how brave she is, all that good stuff, she just changes the people around her. Everyone sort of falls for her because they see that this quirky person inside is really special and kind. And she sticks up for people. She protects people. She works hard, tirelessly, over and over again to protect her friends, because I think Bill Hodges is someone who taught her it's all about friends. It's all about your community and your support system. You got to take care of the people you love. You got to take care of the people who bring light and joy into your life. That's a beautiful message. It really, really is. So Holly is tremendous in this book. This is my favorite. Granted, I haven't yet read the latest Holly novel. This is my favorite Holly iteration. We'll talk a little bit, maybe if I have time, about the If It Bleeds novella, but I believe that one's very, very similar. Anyway, I'll read that one next month. Holly, the standout novel, is in 2 months. But yeah, Holly's just kicking ass and taking names, my guys. This is the one. This is the one where if you are a Holly hater, I recommend this one. I'd like to see what you think after this one. Maybe you might warm up to her a little bit after The Outsider. Let us now do a recap of our characters. We have our 2 tragic families, the Maitlands, Terry, Marcy, Sarah, and Grace, followed by the Petersens, Fred, Arlene, Ollie, and Frankie. We next have the Andersons, lead detective Ralph, his wife Jeannie, and their son at sleepaway camp, Derek. Next we have Merl Cassidy, who's our 12-year-old car thief on the run from an abusive father. He definitely stole a couple scenes from me. Next, we have heavy hitter lawyer Howie Gold. I really enjoyed his devil-may-care, get out of my face, I'll see you in court attitude. Next, we have the right hand of the devil, Mr. Jack Hoskins, who's kind of a narcissistic ass, but he's complex, he's got layers. I do have some pity for him, not necessarily empathy, but I enjoyed all the horror elements associated with this guy, and I felt bad for him. I like that character a lot. Really glad he's in the book. Next, we have mother and son, Claude Bolton and Lovey Bolton. Claude is on the right road, doing better, cleaning up the past, putting one foot in front of the other, taking care of his mother, Lovey, who is 90. We might not have too much longer with Lovey, but I was really glad King gave her a large part of the second half of this book so we could learn a lot more about the Marysville Hole and the Bolton family. And finally, to round us out on our character section, we have Miss Holly Gibney. She is great in this story. Wow. More on Holly as we continue. Let us now transition to strengths and things about this novel I super duper loved. So get your hard hat and your mining gear because we're going underground. I'll see you in the next section. All right, dear ones, as we inch our way into the dark depths of the Marysville Hole, welcome to the strength section celebrating 2018's The Outsider. Oh my goodness, guys. I know that pretty much both of the sections we've previously engaged with have been a celebration of what I enjoy about this novel because, as I've said, once more for the record, I am a fan. This is an exceptional story. It is done so well. Of course, we will get to our areas of criticism and questions, but let's really talk about the areas that are so strong and shone really bright. My first category I might have touched on just a tiny bit in the introduction, but I love our timeline. Friends, the structure and framework of the novel The Outsider is, as we mentioned, 2 weeks. And I love that so much. It is slightly different from other King outputs because, as you know, one of the things I love about King's writing, and I know you love it as well, is that we typically have a lot of years that pass between in these novels. Not always, especially in regards to the Bill Hodges trilogy, but even Bill Hodges. We started in 2009, and it's been about 6 to 7 years in the Bill Hodges trilogy. And we do have about 1 to 2 years in between each book, so we do have that growth of the characters, etc., etc. But in this story, 2 weeks, my dudes, 2 weeks, and it feels like a real cop case. When there is a crime as graphic and horrific as the murder of Frankie Petersen, when that happens in real life, guys, it's all hands on deck. For those of you who have watched investigative cop dramas, they don't sleep. They don't go home to their families. They are on the case 24/7 until it's solved, until they have somebody in custody. That's how it goes. So this felt so close to a real police procedural in terms of the round-the-clock focus, analysis, dissection, pursuit. It is really channeling that, and I love it. The fact that we don't have a story that spans 3, 4, 5, 9, 12, 18 months long, a year plus, there's the immediacy that gives the story such energy and power. So anytime they're moving to each location, there's a goal in mind. They gotta get to this, they gotta try that, they gotta explore this. So the speed and pacing inside our 2-week window, so cool, guys. I really, really enjoy that aspect of it. And I love that some of the chapters we get talk about the very day we're on. So we realize, okay, so Holly was just in Ohio like 24 hours earlier. She's taken a flight to Oklahoma. Now they're in Texas. Just really, really cool stuff. I love our time frame. Our timeline for the story is working so, so well. So the next area of the text that I super love is mixed media. So I know that a lot of us out there most likely listen to The Outsider on the audiobook, and it's exceptional because we have actor Will Patton at the helm. He is the narrator of many a King title, and he is just incredible. One of the things I love about Stephen King's name is, bless him, he really gets the heavy hitters, and professional actors behind the mic for an audiobook, there is nothing better, my friends. Like, I know that there are very talented voice actors out there, but if you have a professional actor, oh man, you're in for a treat. You are really gonna get your money's worth, and you're gonna have an exceptional novel experience. I just think you will. Will Patton always delivers. My point is, I know that a lot of us listen to the audiobook, but please make sure you have a physical copy of the text, because this one has a lot of mixed media elements that make this novel very, very cool. The font changes because we are jumping around from interviews to depositions to eyewitness accounts. As I mentioned previously, we have a lot of point of view switches to various citizens throughout Flint City. We're talking to this old lady. We're talking to the strip club bartender, bouncer. We're talking to one of the cab drivers who gave Terry Maitland a ride to the bus station. It's very jaunty, but the font is different. The way that the paragraphs are organized. You guys even know when italics are present, that's something that we need to pay attention to. That's a huge thing in any sort of novel. That leads to a lot. So I love the mixed media elements, and it really enhances the police procedural narrative because there's a lot of bureaucracy with police work, guys. Government work is paperwork, my dudes. All of these rules and regulations have a form attached to them, and King embodies that with the text of this novel. It's really, really cool. It's something that I like a lot. If you are someone who follows the Kim C playbook, which is have the book in front of you while the audiobook is going, it's the best. It's absolutely my favorite way of reading a King title. This is so great, guys. You get to see the organization of the transcript. Notice how the margins are different. The font is completely different from the novel typeset. You've got the autopsy notes. You have proprietary documents that only the cops see. And the reader gets to see that, so you feel it's really breaking that fourth wall a little bit. You feel the real of the police bureaucracy and the fact that this novel starts in medias res. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a Latin phrase meaning right in the middle of the action. This novel opens up when Frankie Petersen has been dead for a very short amount of time. And the case is on. The investigation is full on running, sprinting by the time we crack into it. The mixed media documents is so cool, my dudes. If you don't have a copy of this one, please get one. Do yourself a favor. It's pretty amazing. My third area of strength, I'm titling The Genre Blur. So we're really going to explore this topic in our next section, which is our criticism and question section, because I really like that half of this novel is police procedural crime cop drama. And then we have an intersection of the supernatural, the paranormal, the unexplained, and they kind of crash into each other, and one has to accommodate the other. They do work together really well. Some people weren't a fan, and we'll talk about that more in the next section, but I really like it. Because when we look at king titles, I don't know if we have a king title that has done it like this to such a degree. I don't know if we've had a king title that has, up until this point, other than Bill Hodges, taken the impossible, mysterious, supernatural and crashed into the police procedural. I would say we don't even really have that in Bill Hodges because the point of view is so different. For example, in End of Watch, and as well as Mr. Mercedes, we are in the POV of Brady Hartsfield. So we know what that menace is doing. We know what he's planning. We know what he's plotting. We're in his mind. We know. But here in The Outsider, it's the cops hunting down this mystery, trying to figure it out. Holly Gibney is assisting by bringing in the concepts of the impossible and of lore that is at its root fictional. She is bringing that to these police officers, asking them to suspend their disbelief and try and figure it out to see if this leads somewhere. So I believe we have never really had the genre blur the way we have in this novel. It is very, very concretely dynamic. The first half is all that whodunit. Who killed Frankie Petersen? We might have thought in the first 50 plus pages that it was Terry Maitland. We were concerned it might have been a guy who looked like him. And then, right around that 250 page mark, when Holly Gibney is inserted into our equation, then we start getting evidence that Terry could not have been in two places at once. Therefore, the person who has the face of Terry is not human, guys. So then the other half of this novel is trying to reconcile with the impossible. And the two sandwiched together. It's just cool. It is really cool. And I understand that it is polarizing for some. We'll talk about that more in our next section. I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I want to talk about it now, but we'll wait. It's there, and I don't know if I've seen it as strong as it is in this title. I think The Outsider really drew a very thick line in the sand for what King was doing. Post-Outsider, we're going to see this a lot. I actually just read a story entitled Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream that is, wow, really, really channeling The Outsider. More on that later. But the genre blur that is found inside The Outsider is very cool, very dynamic, and I don't know if I've seen it yet in any other King title other than this one. If it exists somewhere else, please let me know because I would like to investigate it further. Like I said in the intro, guys, the only one where it gets the closest for me is From a Buick 8. But From a Buick 8, I think, handles a lot more philosophy and a lot more somber tones of grief and the unknown. We don't really have that here because remember, we're in a 2-week little timeline. This is a quickly paced investigation. It is non-stop action, going from one place to the other, talking to this person and that person and hunting down the clues. We are on the case. We are in it. We don't have that in From a Buick 8. From a Buick 8 takes place over 20 years, I think. This mysterious Buick that has this wild, crazy, creepy, gooey alien life emerging from its truck bed. And all of the cops are doing these scientific experiments, dissections, video journals, analysis. They're just trying to figure it out over several decades. So even though they're similar, they're not twins. They're definitely not cut from the same cloth. Very, very different. So I really celebrate how unique and original The Outsider is for where we are in King's writing career. I just haven't found any that have stood out so strongly as this one in regards to the genre blur. So I'm really celebrating that here, guys. It is very cool and very strong. My last topic that I have, I won't lean into too much because I think I did a lot of that accidentally in our previous section. But this last strength topic is called Holly Gibney is a star. You guys know that. As I kind of mentioned in our previous character section, Holly is shining the brightest she ever has. In this novel, she is largely alone. She's still grieving, but all of that makes her the strongest iteration of herself we've ever seen. She is very humble. She's doing her best to get finders keepers off the ground, all the stuff that I kind of talked about in our previous section. But we still need to celebrate it as a strength. When I look at the character of Holly Gibney, I think of this little sproutling, if I'm actually thinking of like a literal plant root, sort of emerging out of the dirt with this little green sprig sprout leaves. And in Mr. Mercedes, she's largely buried under the earth. There's no little sproutings. Finders keepers, we have a little bit of green poking through. I don't see a lot of growth in End of Watch, but we'll say that the leaves are seeing the sun a little bit. And in this story, Holly really is branching out, literally as a person connecting with other police officers, and also as a plant metaphor. She is really reaching for the sun. She is pushing through her discomfort, really, really growing as a person, and not letting her neurospicy limitations or proclivities that could halt somebody in their tracks. Holly doesn't allow that to happen. Or we see that she manages it in a really effective way. So she's a star. She's really the star of this novel. And I'm excited to see how her standout novel goes. I'm going to read that in the next couple weeks here, and I'm looking forward to it based on how brightly she shines in this story. Holly is such a strong character, and as is Ralph Anderson. I think Holly steals the show, of course, so Ralph really doesn't get a lot of spotlight time because I think all the areas of spotlight Ralph gets are when he has made a terrible decision in regards to publicly arresting Terry Maitland. This is a choice that haunts him throughout the novel and also will most definitely haunt him for the rest of his life because of what happened. As you guys know, what happened to Terry Maitland, it's Ralph's fault to an extent. So the chips fell as they did, and Ralph has a lot of regret and shame, and that's present. So he's dealing with a lot. He's dealing with a lot of unseen things. I don't know if he gets as much screen time in the powerful way that Holly does. However, when they team up, it's a really great union, and we're really happy to see it happen. Ralph's pretty great because of Holly. When he finally trusts her and lets go and lets this lady work and take the lead and drive the car, then they have success, and Ralph is all the more grateful for it. So really solid stuff. So to recap, my areas of strength, which really this whole episode has been a celebration of all the strengths. There are so many. I love our timeline. The 2 weeks is working so well. It is so cool. It feels very true to life in terms of a nonstop 24/7 police investigation where nobody sleeps and nobody goes home until somebody's caught. Number 2 are mixed media elements. Ooh, I love this, guys. I love the depositions. I love the different typesettings. I love the memos. I love the eyewitness accounts. I love the police bureaucratic documents that are all over the text. And you know what I mean if you have a copy of the novel. So make sure you have a paper, well, either paper or hardback, of course. Make sure you have a physical copy of the text to really, really celebrate the mixed media elements that are plugged in. Number 3, the genre blur. Oh, so good. I'm going to unpack that much, much more here in this novel as well as the coming King titles, because I think this is really the tip of the iceberg. This is the start of something very cool in King's writing path. Just a hypothesis. I will gather more evidence and present my facts at a later time, but the genre blur is a real thing, my dudes. And our last point is, of course, Holly Gibney is a star. If you're a Holly hater, there's really nothing I could do to convince you, but all I can do is present to you that in this iteration, here is all the evidence where she is the strongest iteration of her character we have ever seen her before. And that is something to celebrate. We're seeing the growth and dynamic change from this woman who's had a very sheltered, difficult life. She's shining really bright. She's kicking ass and taking names and solving crimes, and I celebrate that. All right, my buddies, we still have a lot more to go. Our next section is going to be criticism and questions. It's just a tiny little nugget we're going to explore, and then we are going to get into the 2020 HBO miniseries, the 10 episodes of glory that has probably become my second favorite Stephen King adaptation of all time. I mean, that's a tall order, but I think it might be true. So I will see you in the next section. I know the cave is dark, but we're getting to the heart of it all. The chamber of sound is close by. Keep going, and I'll see you in the next section. All right, lovies, this is going to be our last section exploring 2018's The Outsider. This is going to be a very beefy, meaty one. It might go a little long because I'm going to jam in criticism and questions, and then we're also going to talk about the show, which I have a couple pages of notes here because it was so damn good. So we have a couple categories we're definitely going to explore. I'm going to try and jam it all into this little hot pocket here. We're going to do it. But yeah, we might need to take a break. We might need to get a snack. We might need to get an electrolyte beverage. Who knows? We'll see if we can make it to the end of the race. If we can make it out of this cave, that's for darn sure. Which, by the way, talk about the nightmare fuel of the Marysville Hole. I never want to go in a cave, ever. Oh my god, horrors. Anyway, okay. Criticism and questions. I know I kind of hinted at one of the large critiques found for The Outsider in our previous section, and that is the fact that the genre blur I talked about in the last section doesn't sit well with everybody. I've talked to a couple constant readers about The Outsider, and as much as they liked it, they noticed that there is a little bit of a... how to articulate this? You basically have to change your pace a little bit, or kind of halt, gather yourself, and reevaluate. Because the way this story reads is a crime thriller. I remember when I was trying to talk my dad into reading it. He's a huge crime fan. That's basically all he reads. It's all he watches. So I said, okay, Dad, The Outsider. It's King writing crime. It's a police procedural cop drama. And then I kind of paused and looked at him and said, and then it becomes Stephen King. And there was no other way to phrase it. I don't think it stopped him from reading it. I think he read it. I think he enjoyed it. I need to check. I actually need to call my dad and ask if he read this one. But anyway, a lot of people had problems with exactly that. The first half reads like a cop drama, the whodunit, the mystery that so many of us love. Typically, you find out who the real killer was, right? They are taken into custody, justice is served, or they're killed out in the open and the story ends. This is very different because King makes the reader confront the idea of the impossible meeting the factual, hopefully factual, justice system where evidence is gathered to punish the guilty, to persecute the guilty. A lot of people did not like the genre blur and felt, why did King have to introduce the supernatural? Why could he have not continued with this crime drama flexing he was working with? Why was the supernatural incorporated? Why did the outsider have to channel this folklore embodiment of El Cuco, the boogeyman? Why does it have to be a monster? When King was doing a beautiful job with this compelling mystery where the cops had the wrong guy, vigilante justice took him out, we've got shame and darkness and murder and families destroyed. We've got, wow, such powerful concepts, but they're hunting down a monster that King does not provide a lot of background lore for. As I have mentioned in many previous Year of Underrated Stephen King episodes and novel explorations, oftentimes I'm always hungry for a little bit more lore. King doesn't always lean into that. Sometimes he does, but I would say 9 times out of 10, he doesn't. He gives you a little bit of an opaque description of what he's working with, and that's it. You as the reader, your imagination is supposed to fill in the blanks, and then he just carries you through the plot until the end. So with this notion of the boogeyman, that has many faces and names depending on your culture, and that's what King is giving to the reader in this novel. Where are you from? What does your boogeyman look like? Is it Baba Yaga from the Balkans? Is it El Cuco from Puerto Rico and the island nations, as well as the East Coast? Is it Kali, the destroyer goddess from India? Is it Pele, the volcano goddess of the Polynesian islands? Like, insert your boogeyman, insert your monster who is a child eater, who is a grief eater. That's what King does. He just throws the ball to the reader and allows your own culture to color between the lines. I think it's fine. I think it works, but I am hungry for a little more, and I'll get to that in regards to our next point. That one of the main criticisms is how some readers disliked how it becomes a supernatural tale mixed with a police procedural. Because I think King could have omitted that and maybe decided to make a crime novel where the killer of Frankie Petersen was indeed a flesh and blood individual who maybe had the technical savvy of Brady Hartsfield. I mean, I don't know, technically speaking, he's kind of already done that with the character of Brady Hartsfield and Mr. Mercedes, but I'm not knocking King's vision at all. I'm just trying to reconcile those who disagree with it. I think this genre blur works well. Other people, maybe not so much. They were really expecting a flesh and blood killer, which, so to speak, the outsider is kind of flesh and blood. He's just had many bloods and many fleshes, but that is one of the main criticisms for the outsider, guys. A lot of people were let down by the fact that this takes a very big supernatural curve. They kind of felt the power of the first half of the novel, this investigative, quick-paced chase that the reader is on, falls a little flat when we have to integrate a supernatural monster to the story. I think it works okay. I'm okay with King's creative decision to go in that direction, and I think the genre blur is a really powerful concept that we're going to see more as King continues to write. So just kind of keep that in mind, but some people didn't like it, and there's nothing we can do but to just kind of celebrate the strengths and highlight that King did really try and keep the integrity of a police investigation throughout this narrative. He really leaned into that very hard, and I think it's coming through successfully with all of the mixed media, with our timeline, with all of the cop characters we have involved. It does work really well, but the supernatural aspect of it, specifically with Jack Hoskins and the outsider and all of these really freaky horror stuff. I mean, if you wanted a flesh and blood killer and you're not thrilled with the direction of the outsider, there's nothing we can do to help. It is what it is, but I understand why people would kind of be a little let down. Some people don't want to suspend their disbelief and think about a monster. They don't. Technically speaking, vampires, werewolves, ghosts, on paper, they don't exist. But that's not to say they're not real. That's a story for another day. But yes, one of the main criticisms is a lot of people were kind of unhappy with the fact that there's a big psychological, supernatural, paranormal shift mixed with this police investigation. So just keep that in mind. Some people have a lot of problems with it. I think it's working great. The second critique that I have is in regards to our final chapter. This is when Ralph Anderson and Holly Gibney confront the outsider in the Marysville Hole. The Marysville Hole, the reader finds out, is a mass grave, so to speak, for the Bolton family. There was a tragic cave-in years prior, and many people were lost forever and died in a very horrific, nightmare-inducing way of like starving to death in the dark. Really terrifying. But anyway, the outsider likes to reside in places of grief. And he also needs to go to a private, isolated location to rest up and regenerate, because he needs approximately 2-ish, 3-ish weeks to finish transforming, which is another cool reason why the timeline is so effective for our novel. The amount of time this creature needs for the DNA to stick to his bones right and form his face sharply so he's not this amorphous blob is around 2 to 3 weeks. And he hunkers down in a hole. This one's a literal hole. Sometimes it's a graveyard or an abandoned warehouse, a barn. He needs a quiet, dark place to sort of lick his wounds and plan the next move and regenerate. In our last chapter, we've got Ralph, we have Holly, and we have this outsider who kind of takes my book club brought this to my attention, and I think it's a very good criticism. It's a little upsetting that we don't have a lot of lore for the outsider. He doesn't know if he's the only one. He knows he's very old. He knows he's been doing this for a very, very long time. And by doing this, he's been transforming into other people. It's an exhausting effort. That's why he needs a lot of sustenance via food by murdering people, specifically children, because according to the outsider, children are the most delicious food. And so he verbalizes that to Holly and Ralph. They're engaging with him in a conversation, trying to figure out, who are you? Why do you do this? And so I think, it's a part of me wishes that the outsider kind of would have remained silent and more mysterious, because he kind of takes a Bond villain approach and reveals his whole scheme a little bit. I think he's a little too chatty, and we don't have a lot of lore to gel all this together. So I don't know if it's successful that the outsider is verbalizing as much of his life as he has. On the one hand, I think it works because he really is most likely lonely. Not that he is a compassionate creature who we feel bad for. He is a heinous, murdering monster. But he's never been found out. He's a legend, in theory. He is a cultural legend throughout time and geography and hundreds of years. Traveling, transforming, killing, leaving behind death and destruction all over the world is what we as the reader are led to believe. And he's never been found out. And we don't know if he's the only one. Technically speaking, the next novella collection featuring Holly Gibney is If It Bleeds, in which we find out he's not the only one. If I'm correct, I've only read it once, so it's been a hot minute. But he doesn't know anything about himself. He just knows what he needs. He's never really thought about it. And so the fact that he kind of has this reflective moment with Ralph and Holly, that's, I don't know, guys. I just don't know if it works. Part of me wishes he would have been a little bit more primitive and primal and not really said much, and just kind of let the animal self, the creature self. I think a lot more mystery would have provided greater strength. But the fact that he's using logic and reason to explain himself, and kind of say, well, of course I eat kids. They're delicious. It's like, okay. I don't know. I think I needed to put that in the cook pot. It didn't ruin anything for me. It didn't take me out of the magic. It didn't splash cold water on my face by any means. I stopped for a second. I stopped, especially when other book club members pointed this out as well. Like, this final confrontation with the outsider. I'm glad it happened. I think the setting is perfect. It's really dramatic. It's really cool. Frightening. The stakes are very high. I just kind of wish the outsider would have either known a bit more about himself and channeled his inner dark god and been very, listen, plebeian, I have eaten my way through mankind for generations. You guys aren't gonna stop me, and I'm not gonna talk to you or even bother trying to rationalize. Get out of my way before I kill you, so to speak. I kind of wish he would have channeled a very dark, powerful, god-like figure. And I wish he would have known that about himself, on how resilient and ancient, and the power of that, of surviving through time. What's interesting is, from what we get in the text, the outsider seems to struggle with the identity a little bit, which is fine. When we look at what we've got, it works. But yeah, if you really read this last chapter, guys, and hyper focus on everything the outsider says, it's, yeah. I'm actually going to read a small section to kind of highlight what I'm talking about. Some of you might not have a problem with it, but when you think about what he says, maybe how he would have had more power or more ground if he would have said much less. Let's take a look. This is on page 522 in the American hardcover. When Holly spoke again, her voice was lower but still urgent. Remember what he did to Detective Hoskins, Ralph. His touch is poisonous. Only when I'm in this transformative state, the outsider said mildly. It's a form of natural protection and rarely fatal. More like poison ivy than some sort of radiation. Of course, Detective Hoskins was susceptible, shall we say. And once I've touched someone, I can often, not always, but often get into their minds, or the minds of their loved ones. I did that with Frank Petersens' family. Only a little, enough to push them in directions they were already going. You should stay where you are, Ralph said. The outsider raised his tattooed hands. Certainly. As I've said, you're the man with the gun. But I can't let you leave. I'm too tired to relocate, you see. I had to make the drive down here far too soon, and I had to buy a few supplies, which drained me even more. It seems we're at a standoff. You put yourself in this position, Ralph said. I mean, you know that, right? The outsider looked at him out of a face that still held the fading remains of Terry Maitland and said nothing. Heath Holmes, okay. The others before Holmes, also okay. But Maitland was a mistake. I suppose that's so. The outsider looked puzzled but still complacent. Yet I've taken others who had strong alibis and immaculate reputations. With evidence and eyewitness testimony, the alibis and reputations make no difference. People are blind to explanations that lie outside their perception of reality. You should never have come looking for me. You should never have even sensed me, no matter how strong his alibi was. Yet you did. Was it because I came to the courthouse? Ralph said nothing. Holly had come down the last step and was now standing beside him. The outsider sighed. That was a mistake. I should have thought more seriously about the presence of TV cameras, but I was still hungry. Yet I could have stayed away. I was gluttonous. And overconfident while you're at it, Ralph said. And overconfidence breeds carelessness. Cops see a lot of that. Well, perhaps I was all three. But I think I might have gotten away with even that. He was looking speculatively at the pale, gray-haired woman next to Ralph. It's you I have to thank for being in this current situation, isn't it? Holly. Claude said your name is Holly. What made you able to believe? How were you able to convince a party of modern men who probably don't believe in anything beyond the range of their 5 senses to come down here? Have you seen another one like me somewhere? The eagerness in his voice was unmistakable. We didn't come here to answer your questions, Holly said. One of her hands was stuffed into the pocket of her wrinkled suit jacket. In the other, she held the UV flashlight, which was not turned on at the moment. The only light came from the standing lamp. We came here to kill you. I'm not sure how you hope to do that, Holly. Your friend might chance firing his gun if it was just the 2 of us, but I don't think he wants to risk your life as well. And while one or both of you might try to attack me physically, I think you find me surprisingly strong as well as a bit poisonous. Yet even in my current depleted state. It's a standoff for now, Ralph said, but not for long. Hoskins wounded State Police Lieutenant Unel Sablo but didn't kill him. By now he will have called this in. A good try, but not out here, the outsider said. There is no cell reception for 6 miles going east and a dozen going west. Did you think I wouldn't check? Ralph had been hoping for just that, but it had been a thin hope. As it happened, however, he had another card in his hand. Hoskins also blew up the vehicle we came in. There's smoke, plenty of it. For the first time, he saw real alarm in the outsider's face. Okay, my dudes, so let's look at that. Our outsider's real chatty, right? It's fine, but a part of me kind of wishes King wouldn't have taken that direction and wouldn't have given the outsider such a Bond villain kind of calculating and one-upping Ralph and Holly to say, oh, I did all of these things, XYZ, here are all the moves I made previously. I kind of wish we would have had a dark ancient being looking at Ralph and Holly as the plebeians they are. We have an ancient creature that has thrived and survived on death and chaos for probably thousands of years, definitely hundreds of years. And so I just want him to be more godlike and more, why on earth would you rationalize anything with these humans, you know? Like, no. So, I don't know. I think my critique is wondering about these final moments with the outsider and the conversation they all 3 have. I don't know if it's working, guys. I think it could have been stronger. It's fine. It's fine that the outsider takes the Bond villain approach and explains all of his motivations and previous actions, but I don't know, guys. What do you think? I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, it's fine. I'm okay with it. But when we've got this perceived lore, the lore that I have in my mind, the Kukui, who I was raised with, is not going to talk to Holly and Ralph like this logical calculating, oh, so you found me. How did you do it? You know, like, no, I would probably launch poison in Ralph's eyes first and be guttural and primal and, I don't know. It's just interesting. Again, this leads back to the root of the lore, right? What does King give us for the outsider? Not a lot. So the reader has to infer what our own imagination and perception of the boogeyman is. And when we do that, well, we're led in different directions. My boogeyman is this ancient, powerful creature that doesn't listen to no man or woman at all. But then again, maybe he would if he was the only one, if he was wounded or up against the wall. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Okay, let's get into the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are just going to talk about what I liked because there are a lot of things and there's nothing really that I don't like because it's so good. HBO Max put forth 10 episodes of The Outsider, which is spearheaded by King, of course, and Richard Price, who is a novelist and also a writer for the 2002, often listed as one of the greatest shows of all time, The Wire. The Wire is, of course, a crime drama about Baltimore cops and criminals. You get to see both sides. It's really, really masterful. We actually studied a season in creative writing. It's something to write home about, let me tell you. But we have Actor Ben Mendelsohn as Ralph Anderson, Mare Winningham as Jeannie Anderson, and Cynthia Erivo as Holly Gibney. So here are the things I liked, and let's start with the casting. Oh my goodness, friends, the performances are beyond stellar. Oh my goodness, stellar. The performances are so strong, and probably one of my favorites is from Marcy Maitland in the show Her Name is Glory. Oh my goodness. Wow, what a powerhouse. The second thing I like about the show is the script. The first 2 episodes are really, really strong and move very, very quickly, as we pretty much have the Maitlands and the Petersens cleared off the board in 2 episodes. The people in my book club weren't a fan of the pacing after that because it does dip down a little bit and the pacing does slow, probably episodes 3 through 8. We have a lot of the investigation, getting to know Holly Gibney, getting to know the previous components of this case, the Holmes murder. It's connected to New York City. We've got a bunch of stuff going on, and then it ramps back up in episodes 8 through 10. But I love the script, guys. I think it really captures the heart of this story. It doesn't deviate too far, and I love that. We have all the integral parts present. The liberties that they do take are mostly with character, and we'll talk about why that's so strong. But plot-wise, we're real close, if not almost exactly where we need to be when it comes to this story's reveal. It starts off with Terry and the tragedy of Frankie Petersen, and everything that goes down is exactly how it goes down in the show, and I absolutely love that. The other thing I like about the script is they made the story a lot darker, which who knew you could do that, but you definitely can. Specifically making the Andersons have a bit more pain in their day-to-day. Remember when we talked about little Derek Anderson, who's away at summer camp in the novel? Well, in the show, he passed away from cancer at a very young age. And so the Andersons are finding themselves as individuals, but also as a loving couple. We have a lot of evidence from the story that they are very devoted and loving with each other, but we also see some flashbacks when it's freshly after the death of Derek, and it was real bumpy roads there, guys. Not good at all. So we do make the story a lot darker and more sad with the death of Derek, and we also make it a little bit more hopeful and exciting for the character of Holly Gibney, who has a love interest. And it is so touching, guys. He's a security guard named Andy who has previous affiliation with law enforcement. He helps her, but he is, granted, I'm very biased because my love, his name is Andy, so obsessed with that. I just think they make a really good match. He pursues her in a very wholesome way. He just is so into her. It's so great, guys. I love the love story. I think it's done so well. And of course, the pacing, it absolutely nails what the book channels, which is that quick turnaround, day after day, nonstop, nobody sleeps. We just keep going. Holly drives to Flint City, which the show takes place in Georgia. So it's Flint City, Georgia, and then she goes to New York. She's really jaunty. So Holly is all over the place on buses. But the pacing of the show is working quite well. I was really happy with it. I had zero problems with the slow burn. I was so wrapped by all the performances that I have zero complaints. A lot of my book club folks did find it a little slow, but I vehemently disagree. I didn't think it was slow at all. I thought it was perfect. So I understand some people did find it slow because the first 2 episodes are so action-packed. We've just got a high body count. People are dying, getting murdered all over the place. It's really moving very quickly. We've got Frankie Petersen's body, which is holy shit. It's so graphic, guys. Oh my god. That part absolutely makes me want to almost throw up. It's really bad. Very, very graphic makeup of a child murder. It's rough. But then the police discovering the body of Frankie Petersen, the arrest of Terry Maitland, the murder of Terry Maitland, and then the subsequent death of all the Petersens, Ollie, Fred, Arlene, everybody. It's just so rough. And that's in the first 2 episodes. So we have a really explosive debut of this story and all the characters. And then it does dip down and we do get a slowdown, but I did not think that was a problem. I thought it was perfection. So the other areas of the script that I really love is the character of Jack Hoskins. I really like the actor that portrays him. But unlike Jack in the novel, who seems like he doesn't have any friends at all, Jack in the television show is different, and people like him, sort of. At least there are moments where we feel there are police officers who genuinely care about him and are concerned with him. He also shows a lot of care and concern for his fellow police officers. One of the officers, I think her name's Betsy, she's pregnant, she recently has a baby, and Jack's invited to the baby shower. He holds the baby, he's there at the birth. So there's a lot of strong elements that are shown on the show that indicate Jack is kind of embraced by his police officer community. They might think he's a bit of a hard ass or a bit of a jerk, but they don't hate his guts. Nobody hates Jack. He might have a very private life where he is kind of an asshole, and we do see that with his shenanigans at the Peach Crease, which is I just have to laugh at that. Okay, so Gentlemen Please is our strip club in the novel, but it's been renamed to the Peach Crease, which is hilarious and so filthy. Oh my god, so funny. So the Peach Crease is a hole-in-the-wall little strip club, really little and gross, very sordid, and Jack is a frequent customer, and he gets loaded and harasses people and gets in fights. He's just a menace. He's an absolute menace. But wow, they do an amazing job by indicating his downfall and showing how tortured he is from the outsider choosing him to do his bidding. He has to buy supplies for him. He has to hunt and give him food, and he has to line up innocent victims for him, and he's also in an incredible amount of pain. And then there's a really freaky scene with his dead mother beating the hell out of him. Oh my god, guys, like beating him to a bloody pulp. It is creepy. But I really like the layers of Jack, and he actually does bring forth a lot of empathy for me. Toward the end, I felt really bad for him and kind of wished he would have had a better deal or was able to escape from the outsider. And that only came through because the performance was so strong and the script was very strong of making him a complex character that had a lot of misfortune. He was a bit of a jerk who like kidnaps Holly, and he's doing the will of the outsider because he's terrified. He is so scared and in pain, and we really resonate with him and feel bad for him. So Jack was great. Instead of Lovey Bolton, our incredible 90-year-old mother of Claude Bolton, we have Claude's brother, which, side note, the actor who plays Claude, his name is Paddy Constantine. Please forgive me if I butchered the last name. Okay, guys, I know I've said this once or twice before, but I think Paddy's from Ireland. And I was completely fooled by his southern accent. And that is the mark of a champion for me. If you fool me, because I can spot him, I have a really strong ear from a UK actor who is struggling. And southern accents are hard, guys. They are challenging. There's so much nuance. I mean, regional dialects are tricky. But he did so good. Oh my god, he is so terrific, Paddy as Claude Bolton. But anyway, we don't have Lovey, but we have his brother, who's another, I think, British actor. He did exceptional as well. They got some epically good people to play these not so savory southern gentlemen with a lot of crime in their past, but I was so into both of them. So Claude and his brother working so well. Claude's brother is taking on the role of Lovey Bolton in terms of informing Holly and the officers about why the Marysville Hole is probably the best place to go look for the outsider. So really good stuff. As I mentioned, I love Holly's romance with Andy. I definitely shed a few tears at the outcome of that. And oh my goodness, just Glory Maitland, give her all the awards. I love the power she brings. She has the best lines, her interactions with the townsfolk who, oh God, I really like how the show puts a spotlight on this woman's suffering, on what it's like to have your husband accused of the worst crime possible. You have 2 young children who are being ridiculed and ostracized from their school. She has to put them in homeschool, and then the homeschool teachers are hidden reporters trying to get the scoop and publicize her pain. Like, oh my God, she is one of the strongest characters in the show. Her performance is electrifying. I'm just such a huge fan. But yes, guys, all 10 episodes absolutely bring this novel to life. To recap everything I love, we are in good hands with Richard Price. He brings the grit and the grime and the fear and the edge. I love the casting. I love the script. I love that we have that police procedural edge akin to The Wire. The pacing is working for me. I had 0 problems. I know a couple people found it was slow in the middle. I loved every second. Cynthia Erivo as Holly Gibney. My God, you guys, jumping back to the performances for a quick second. She might be my favorite Holly Gibney performance, and I've seen a few. We have Justine Loop, who is in the Mr. Mercedes NBC show. I like her a lot. I like that she's kind of quirky and more youthful and slightly more awkward, but Cynthia Erivo is more blunt and brazen, and I really like her mind, and I like her past that includes her parents and the challenges that they had raising a girl with such a special mind. I like that we get a glimpse into her childhood and how she was so little, getting MRIs because they couldn't figure out why she was able to retain the facts she could, why she was able to articulate and see the world in such a way. I love her performance. She is just so beautiful. I just think she's a beautiful actress, and it's understated. It's not an overstated performance of somebody with neurodivergence. It's subtle, it's unique, and it's layer upon layer upon layer. So it's not all at once. You wouldn't be able to immediately tell that this character, Holly Gibney, has neurodivergence. You just would say, okay, she's a little brash, she's a little rude. But when you listen to her and we get to see her mind and the way she puts pieces together and the way she interacts, it's so good. I love it. I love Cynthia Erivo. Huge fan. Once more, casting, script, pacing, performances, everything about The Outsider I love. I love the dark tone. Oh my God, guys, like the first 2 episodes, the filter they used, it's like this brown filter to indicate a cloudy, isolated, rural, small town. It feels frightening and unsettling. They just knocked it out of the park. It's so good. It's so strong. The tone is very heavy throughout, and even when the supernatural elements start to creep into the story, it just works. They handle it so well. Nothing is overwhelmingly dumped on the viewer. It's just slowly incorporated until the puzzle pieces are solidly connecting and attached. And I'm such a fan. Oh my God, it's so good. But yes, as you guys know, I'm a broken record for Storm of the Century. It's my favorite Stephen King miniseries of all time, but I think this might be my second favorite. This one's very close to perfect for me, not going to lie. I watched the whole thing for the second time right before my book club celebrating The Outsider. It was so awesome to see it again. And like I mentioned earlier, the pain of Terry Maitland's death, knowing what was coming for Terry. And there's a monologue in there when he's talking to Ralph Anderson about teaching his son Derek how to bunt. That was straight from the text, you guys, and it made me cry. There were many moments in the miniseries where I just teared up and let the tears fall because I was feeling it so much. That is the mark of a successful miniseries for me, a successful film adaptation, and this was incredible. But yeah, huge fan. There is nothing I did not like. I literally have no criticism for the show. None whatsoever. I thought it was beautiful, and that will lead us to the end, my guys. I hope this wasn't 10,000 hours long. I'll have to calculate everything all together here pretty soon. But thank you guys so much for listening to my coverage on The Outsider. As I mentioned earlier, I will get around to End of Watch. I promise I won't leave you hanging. That's not my intention. Just know it's going to be a minute because I was having way too much fun with The Outsider. And I'm also having a lot of fun on the Patreon. I am working my way through the brand new Stephen King short story collection, You Like It Darker. I am 4 stories in and the coverage is on the Patreon. So if you're reading that collection, jump on over to the Patreon and read along with me. I also have SK Femme Fridays, which are a total blast, where each week I'm pulling a name out of a hat and discussing some Stephen King females. It is epic fun. Please make the Patreon a part of your life. You can talk to me directly. There's a lot of fun stuff going on over there. A lot of Kim C, informal, having fun, letting the words just fly. So I would love if you join me over on the Patreon. But if you haven't already, please share this show with a friend. Please make sure you share with a Stephen King fan in your life. It would be great to get more King fans along the way. And if you would be so kind to say hi at underratedsk@gmail or on any of the socials, I would love to hear from you guys. I would love to learn about your thoughts on The Outsider, the novel, as well as the HBO adaptation. I love talking about this book, so I would love to chat more about your thoughts regarding The Outsider whenever you get a chance. I got a lot of work to do, my loves. The Patreon is a very demanding mistress, and I don't mind giving her the time that she requires. So I'm going to jump on over there and do that. But until next time, please stay tuned for my upcoming coverage on Wolves of the Calla, as well as End of Watch. And hopefully, I need to get around to putting my final edits on my return to Duma Key. I love you all so very much. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.